Everyone. I'm Toya. I'm Toya Hemingway. I am with SCORE Chicago. I'm the chapter chair, and thank you so much for joining us today. Since 1964, SCORE has been the nation's largest network of volunteer expert business mentors and is dedicated to helping small businesses get off the ground, to grow, and to achieve their goals. SCORE provides free and confidential business mentoring on an ongoing basis to provide continued advice and support, and offers free online workshops on topics ranging from startup strategies to marketing and finance. If you're interested in being mentored, please visit score.org/Chicago. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter today. Mr. Aaron Levido is a co-founder and chairman of a global marketing consulting organization, which serves senior management of Fortune 500 companies and assessed these companies' market environments in terms of growth, technical threats, opportunities, and competitive positioning. Aaron also taught for several years at the college level at IIT, where he had his undergraduate studies. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us today, and I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you very much. I look forward to being with you today. Thank to our audience. I appreciate your attendance today as well. Before I start into the presentation, I want to request one thing that's a little different than the introduction. I like to have your questions asked when you think of them. And frankly, there is no inappropriate question. So please offer the questions. They'll be transmitted to me and I'll be pleased to respond to them. So that's the way I'd like to walk through the presentation. As you can see, the title is To Plan for a Business Success. And this presentation is really geared to startup organizations and existing organizations that should be writing a business plan in their own right, and able to apply what is presented today to their needs in developing their own business plan. So we really have two audiences, basically, the startup audience and the existing business that is trying to write or to improve upon developing their own business plan. Next page, please. We had a difficulty with the slide on this particular page, so you can see it's jumbling a bit. But let me walk through it. We're going to spend a few moments on the background of the organization that I've been associated with for some 10 plus years, and that's SCORE. And we introduced SCORE originally as to its background, so I won't repeat that right now. A page or two might do that. And then a key section, which is the section that normally people read when this business plan is presented, typically for funding, whether it be a bank or whether it be a private equity organization. They look at the executive summary. If they are turned on by executive summary, they'll have someone else in their organization read the rest of your plan. If they're not turned on by the executive summary, they will thank you for your time and suggest you go in another direction. So the executive summary is obviously written after you've written everything else, and it is a vital part of what you're putting together in your business plan. The operations plan is merely a page or two describing what is the business that you're going to be discussing. And then a crucial section is the marketing plan. And that's really the evaluation of the market that you're going to be serving, and basically the discussion about a vital part of it, and that's your competition. You'll see as I go through this presentation, I spend a great deal of time discussing the import of competition and what you should do about it, because they're going to be there when you enter a market. And frankly, you're going to be taking some of their share of market from them that they've spent years cultivating, and therefore expect them to be there, expect them to do whatever they can to mitigate your entry, and therefore competition becomes a vital part of this presentation as well. We evolved from the marketing plan and that generating revenue to the financial ramifications of the plan. And that's surely the most critical basic line, so that anybody reading it in the financial community is able to make a judgment as to whether an investment in your business is worthwhile. The pro forma P&L statement is really a characterization of the profit and loss of the future business that you're going to evolve. That's what the term pro forma basically means. Normally, profit and loss statements discuss the history of a business, the last 6 months, the last 3 months, the last year. In the case of this presentation and your business plan, it's going to be talking about your future. And that term is used as a pro forma describing a profit and loss statement. Okay. The action plan is really gearing up to do what you've got to do and putting things together to make it happen. And then ultimately, we do get to a section that says write the plan. We don't want to spend too much time working on this ingredient until we get to writing the plan itself. I always felt that discussing problems that those who have written plans have is beneficial to the new people writing plans. So I've discussed in the section number 8 a series of mistakes that I've seen are made often in the development of a plan. And basically, we discuss them, and most critically, I discuss how you mitigate these mistakes so they won't happen to you when you're writing the plan yourself. And then in addition to the business plan, really relates to the resumes of the people who are going to be involved in the plan. And let me offer this suggestion. You will be in the plan, obviously, and your background is critical and it's presented for front end because I presume you, as the creator of the business or the development of the business in being, is the dominant force for the future of the business. In addition to that, you surely have on board a series of other people, or in the case of a pro forma plan, you really want to evolve other people. I suggest that you present the background of people you want to be on your team, and you don't have any requirement for placing names with that background. You merely present the background of people you're going to bring on board, even though you haven't decided who they are yet, and you haven't even identified them in any manner to be part of your program. So basically, these resumes become a critical part of the plan, and that's the final section of the plan that we're going to talk about. There's a gentleman, I assume, is discussing a question, and I'd be happy to cover it when I could see it again. Let me discuss a little bit of my own background again. As I mentioned earlier, I've worked with SCORE for some 10 plus years. And if we could get right 5 and 10, it's not working, but we'll get there eventually. And the subject was business planning. And as presented earlier, I taught the same subject at the college level for some 4 years. And basically, it was an evolution of a new business that was coming out of the development for the professors at this particular university. In addition to this business plan basically for startups, the strategic growth plan that I've evolved and presented before for SCORE related to what I term strategic growth planning. And that's basically the terminology I like to use for a plan that evolves from an existing business. And every business that I know should be writing their own business plan, and it talks about their future growth. And that's basically what the terminology strategic growth planning relates to. Okay. And as you talk about existing business, it assesses the growth opportunities of the business as it's in an existing market and new markets. We evaluate these market segments in terms of the opportunity and whether we want to grow the business through internal growth or whether we look to an acquisition or maybe even a merger to accomplish the growth. And the ultimate end product of that for an existing business is the growth plan that we're making reference to today. Next page, please. A little bit again about SCORE. We covered it earlier. It's a nationwide not-for-profit entity. It basically has in the Chicago area, it's been around for some, yes, 50 years. It has 9 locations. Normally, there are libraries where the presentations are made. And we had, at last count in the last year, a little over 100 volunteers. And as alluded to earlier again, virtually everyone who's part of SCORE are volunteers who are not paid for their services. These typically have been individuals who come from a business area and are retired and basically are not responsible for a business responsibility any longer and focus on the opportunities with SCORE. Typically, when I've seen people want to join SCORE, their goal is to become a mentor. And a mentor is really someone that the individual entity who is in a startup mode or even an existing mode chooses or is chosen by SCORE for them based on their particular need and their particular industry. And since we have as many volunteers as we do, normally our volunteers come from some of the industry segments that the individual is interested in developing. Okay, a crucial ingredient of a mentor. That mentor is not charged any cost associated to the individual needs of the startup or the existing company. And the mentor participates with you as long as you want the mentor to be part of the relationship. So it could be for years, it could be for months, but basically the mentor is there to aid you in developing the business and surely in developing the business plan as well. The workshops and webinars are what you're facing today. SCORE has taught many of these each year, and frankly, I think the number often exceeds 100 and has reached in some years as many as 200 different workshops or webinars. The next page, please. Take a moment to define your business plan. It's a summary of the business you're either in, and therefore it discusses a variety of historical financial statements, or if you're in a startup, it obviously only talks about projected financial statements. A crucial part of your end product of your plan is the financial ramifications of what your plan hopes to accomplish. And that's really what, if you're ever going out to seek financial support, that's what these people are looking for. They'd like to understand the opportunity. If they're going to make an investment in you or they're going to lend you money through a bank, basically they want to see what the likely financial ramifications of your business plan will produce. Next page, please. Excuse me. To take a moment to talk about the scope of a plan, the critical issue of any business as you seek your growth is, are you fulfilling a need of a customer? And that is whether your idea of your startup or whether the evolution of the concept you have in business today is serving the needs of the customer base you want to serve. Crucial ingredient. Okay. And in doing so, you may have a product or you may have a service. It could be either in case. And in the plan, we're going to define the features of the product or service. We're going to talk about the unique advantages, why it's special and can bring something new to the market. And then everybody has limitations, and we discuss limitations as well. And often these limitations exist until you get your money support. And then you're often able to mitigate any limitation you have. So we work through solutions to each of the limitations as well. We typically focus on a market segment that your customer base is serving. Okay, and often in the presentations I've made to date and the startups that I've served, they typically are focused on the Chicago area. But basically, we could be doing a national play. And I'll talk for a moment about the international area, which I think is really beyond the reach of this particular business plan. Embodied in the plan is an estimate of the size of your market segment. And that's a difficult challenge. I'll talk through the mode that I believe is relevant to gaining size. And then obviously pricing and how, if it's a product, the distribution channels you're going to use. If it's a service, normally your organization does its own marketing. And then the forecast of growth, which we really like to play with. Initially, year one, if you're working with a private equity company, you're probably going to need to have a monthly view. The question I see in front of me, can you get a copy of the presentation? Yes, it's available through, in this case, through SCORE. May I have the next page, please? We talked about competition. And I like to reiterate how critical a knowledge base of the competitors' forces are when you enter the marketplace. Please recognize whether you're trying to grow a business or whether you're starting one, the competition is there and you're going to be imposing on their share of market, and they're not happy campers. So recognize they're going to do whatever they possibly can to compete with you. My organization and I in particular felt that the way to play out competition until you actually evolve an interview with they or their competitive forces is to assume you were a competitor. What would you do if you entered the marketplace and I were the competitor? How would I respond to it? You're all bright, you have intuitive feels for business, and you want to pose that challenge to you and how you're going to remedy that force, because I assure you they're going to come at you. Okay. And then ultimately, we've got to have an estimate of penetration of your business from existing base or from a new base. And can you sustain it? Because once again, your competitors are going to respond to you and they're going to do whatever they can to mitigate your entry, because you're about to take share away from them that they've spent years cultivating and they're not happy campers about it. Then we talk about the pro forma P&L statement. And again, the pro forma is a forecast of this profit and loss position. It encompasses direct costs, which are typically payroll, fixed expenses, which are overhead. And I like to stop profitability at cash flow. To go after tax is really an accounting requirement. And I don't feel that we're all capable of doing it well. So I suggest you stop your presentation at cash flow, which is the equivalent of a pre-tax profitability. And again, the forecast is over a period of 3 to 5 years. We start with year one. The private equity people want it monthly. I'll live with a annual year one, go to 3 to 5 years, and that's as far as you really want to push it. Next page, please. In the forecast presentation of your profit and loss statement, Typically, we found people who are new at the business plan effort using what I term the hockey stick forecast. It's one curve that starts at a level. The question asked of me now was, is there a business plan format that's available out there? I'd like to suggest you're welcome to use my business plan format. If you refer to SCORE and SCORE's website, there are a number of other templates available to you. And as you know, if you go to Google, there's an infinite number of templates available to you. So yes, there are multiple available. You either like the one I have to present to you today, or surely go for any other makes more sense to you in what you're going to do. Okay, on this particular page, I'm talking about the growth curve. I like to see three curves, not the hockey stick curve. And in that curve, I suggest you start with a modest curve. And if you really believe in your concept, you position an aggressive curve. And if you're not quite sure, you can present a slow curve, which is less than the modest one in performance. So the chart I'd like to see in your business plan has three curves to it. And basically, then you're going to make a decision when you're ready to wrap up your business plan forecast. It's either going to be a curve on any one of these three items, or it'll be somewhere between a modest and aggressive, or somewhere between modest and slow. It's your call as to what it might be. Excuse me, I have a question. The question was, how do I represent competitive market share? How do I get that estimate? I'd like to hold off on answering that until I get to that section of the presentation, but it's not published material. I refute, and my company refuted published material as being viable and accurate, so we just never used it. Basically, then we have the three charts, and you're going to select from one of those or somewhere in between them as to what your growth curve ultimately will be. Okay. We talk about the investment to keep the business viable and to initiate the business. Often it's third parties offering it, which is your own friends or a private equity company or a bank. The loans are personal, obviously, if it's a bank, and the financing typically comes from private equity. They will become an investor with you. And in that context, they own a part of your business, and recognize when they're involved in that manner, they're going to do everything they can to make you a success because they have risk dollars in play here. So recognize that's a major opportunity for you if you can entice a private equity company to become part of your development of your business. The return on investment, depending on who you're asking, the banks are usually pretty straightforward on theirs and not aggressive on their expectation as long as you remain profitable. And the private equity people are very aggressive about their expectation. Normally in the teens is the annual growth they would expect. In your presentation, you're going to show an annual growth curve and a cumulative growth curve. Erica, I've got greetings, but I'm not sure if you have a question. Okay. The last item is global opportunities. If I may, I had in my firm, I had 8 offices around the world. So I have great appreciation for the significance of the global opportunity. Unfortunately, in this context, what I learned is as you go from country to country, your business plan is different. Their culture is different, their approach to business is different, and therefore you've got to write a different business plan for every country. That being the case, I really do not feel it should be an appropriate part of this presentation. Merely an alert to you, it's there. And when you're successful domestically, we recommend it to our clients. They should look for an opportunity in the global market. We surely ask them not to do it globally because it's a much more complex play because of the different cultures that you're facing in each country, and therefore your business plan is different in each country. So we've excluded the global opportunity in this particular business plan discussion. The next page, please.
Aaron, give me 1 second. I need to switch screens. I need to switch this over. 1 second, 1 second.
Okay, bear with us for a moment, please.
Okay, I think we're good. Are we good? Can you see it now?
And I think you want to go to the very next page, please.
Okay. Right here?
Yeah, this in
Okay.
this page, we talk about the team, and I made reference to it before that you will have a team working for you in your existing business. Obviously, you may have some already. In your new business, you are contemplating them. Don't hesitate writing out the resumes of the people you want to hire. You have no requirement to put names with those resumes. Merely the background and experience of the kind of people you plan to hire. That's the members of the team we're going to have in this business plan. Okay. Now, if you happen to know some or all of these people already, that's great. Then insert them and have their background presented also. But you don't have a requirement for that at all. Merely include the resume of the people that you create and you want to hire, and these are people that are nameless. In every plan and every business created in our world, there are risks associated with the development of whatever concept you're working with. You want to identify these risks and indicate how you're going to mitigate them as well. They may be market issues, they may be product or service development issues, they may be competitive issues. But the key question is, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to mitigate these risks so you can function in business? But please recognize it's not a weakness to your plan, it's a reality to your plan because every business has risks. And therefore, they either know how to mitigate these risks or they have problems with their success rate. Next page, please. Okay, now we're into the heart of the presentation. And as I alluded to earlier, we face the executive summary. And once again, this is as critical a document as you can prepare. It's prepared when all of the other sections have been written. And it normally, in my early stages of writing plans, it was viewed to be a one-pager because the executive doesn't have a lot of time to read anything. But I no longer believe that that's necessary. You probably can write 2 or 3, at most 4 pages. And the reason for this is you're presenting this plan to the financial community, the banks or the private equity people. People reading it don't have a lot of time to read your plan because they have an infinite number of these plans being presented to them trying to raise money for their particular business. So the executive summary is what they'll read initially. Recognize if they get turned on, they'll continue. If they don't get turned on by the idea and your development of your executive summary, they will thank you and move on to another opportunity. So you're looking at a relatively short document. As I suggested, a couple, 3 pages is probably ideal. A 1 page isn't no any longer the mode that you should worry about. But it's got to have everything in it, and I've tried to allude to the material that you should have in the particular executive summary. But again, it comes from everything you've written already in your business plan. Next page, please. And some, I call it motherhood ingredients. In your plan, you've got to state in your presentation, you're going to be positive. You got to present an enthusiastic position in it. It's got to be reasonably succinct because you only have a couple, 3 or 4 pages. And you must portray your understanding of the business environment you're going to be operating within and your ability to either enter it, as typically this presentation is focused upon, or to expand your existing business base. Next page, please. The operation plan is very straightforward. It's merely a definition of your business. And we want to do this very early so they know what they're going to be facing in the plan in terms of what is the business you plan to be in. What's your management organization going to look like? Again, you don't need names associated with these people. And then do you require physical facilities? Typically, if it's a manufacturing business idea, or if it's a service, you probably don't require that at all. Okay, next page, please. Embodied in the operations plan is going to be, if you're in the manufacturing end, you're going to face a technology base. If you're in the service end, you may not have a technology base facing you, although there's smatterings of technology in almost any service offering as well. You're going to face technology of your competition. You're going to face technology of new players in the marketplace. Lazario had just said they're in the service. That's fine because the presentation covers that as well. But were you in manufacturing, your anticipation of future technology, okay, basically is what you're going to face and how you're going to remedy that technology entering your marketplace. Recognize it's going to happen. They've alerted you to it by talking to others in the market as opportunities, and basically your customer base in the future has been approached by anybody with a new technology to talk about whether or not they view the technology as an opportunity to serve their particular need. So it's critical to understand it, and you gain that sense from reading and talking to customers because the customers have been approached by the new technology people. The question on the thing, can I recommend CPAs? I really would prefer not ask responding to that. I have my own preference personally, but I don't feel that that would be appropriate for me to recommend any a third-party business to be serving you in the future. You will seek that out, and your banker can help you as well. And if you're in the private equity play, they'll recommend someone who can help you as well. Okay, the personnel plan, that's who you're going to have in the business and when. And the order fulfillment is how you serve your clients' businesses or your customers' businesses by when your product's going to be available and where it is, and the opportunity of your product or service to serve their particular need. Next page, please. Now to a crucial part of where you are, and this is the section that's going to talk about generating revenue. Okay, it's going to discuss the product and service description. The environmental factors are really the macro, the country's environment, because it's very difficult to start new or try to expand existing when you're in a macro environment that's not growing. So if there's a forecast of the U.S. market, GPS gross GNP, I apologize, the GNP of the country, and it's not going to grow, you've got a tough battle. But if it's growing even modestly, you're in the mode where you want to have entry or expansion played out in some manner. The target market segments, we've discussed where you're going to be serving a market with your product or service, and obviously competition. The value proposition is a positioning of where we are today with the product or service. It's a definition of the state of your business base today. Pricing, pretty critical how we get there. The marketing of the product, how you market your product. I'll talk through how I believe you should contemplate it because the need is significant for you to penetrate a market by your marketing approach to that thing. And ultimately, your forecast of revenue. And that from that comes your pre-tax profitability or your cash flow. Next page, please. Okay, initially in a plan, you're going to define the features and benefits of your product or service. Okay, what benefits does it offer a customer? What needs does it meet the customer? And how, in fact, could it improve the performance of a customer's products or a customer's service? The question is, can your own business plan be critiqued? You want to approach an organization like SCORE that has mentors who would be pleased to aid you in the finalization of your plan. And therefore, if you have a draft in place, they will surely aid you by critiquing that draft. But it's a positioning of SCORE, and surely you can contact them and look up their website, and it's SCORE Chicago, and that has the outlines as to who you might send your draft of your own business plan to date. Okay, then I have the last point on page number 6 is of any patents or other intellectual property. Typically, we have not found that be applicable to these startup plays. It might be in existence for some of the business here that are in being, but normally we don't face that as an issue at all. So we have not spent much time on the patent or intellectual property ingredients of a product or service. Next page, please. Here we face the value proposition I alluded to earlier. It's a statement of how your company will basically meet your customer needs. And the term I used was uniquely because we presume others are serving your customer needs today, and you're going to offer something different to them that will give you an opportunity to penetrate the market. Okay, I've seen someone call it a position statement instead of a value proposition. Either one is applicable here. And embodied in these are the target market segment we're doing. Yeah, SCORE Chicago is the organization I'm making reference to. Target market segment description. Demographic behavioral is consumer. Industrial is much less complex, but important as is the consumer, obviously. The product service benefits to the target customers. That's critical to be asking why you can offer something to the customer base in the market segment you're going to serve. And then your ability to identify the strengths and weaknesses of your primary competition. And if I may, it's not your judgment that's going to evolve. It's a judgment of your customer base who is being served by these competitors. And they'll aid you in defining what they view to be the strengths and weaknesses of competition. And what we found when we interview competitors, they have a lot to say about the strengths and weaknesses of their competitors. Unfortunately, it's normally a negative discourse because they don't believe anybody is as good as they. And therefore, their posturing on what they think of their competitors is often set aside as being real and can be included in the business plan. Okay, our next page, please. There are two major markets that you may be part of. One is the consumer market, which includes demographic and psychographic ingredients. And you can see it's a very complex definition if you've got a consumer-based product or service. The other is the business market, which is the industry segments where normally You're evolving a service and product to be sold to companies who have a service and product that your offering is going to improve upon. So basically, the business segment is cleaner and easier to get to, but the consumer one is vital, and I don't belittle it at all. It just is more complex to be able to define it well. Okay? And sizing up the growth of your target market. Basically, I have found that sizing a market is something that you, as someone entering it, or even your customer base, has no meaningful capacity to do. It's beyond your understanding of the scope of the market. You may know what you're serving, but you're not able to judge size. The only source that we have found is viable, and it is not published information. It's meaningful interviews with competitors. Competitors have a feel, and often we're surprised at how weak that feel may be, but a feel for the size of the market segment they're serving and can aid you in estimating that size. And the question often is, why will the future competitor do that? And we have found because you've just completed XD number of interviews with their customer base or their potential customer base. These are people they like to penetrate, but they haven't penetrated. And this customer base is giving you information about the evolution of the market you're going to serve. You have the ability to tell that to the competitors, and they in turn will respond to you. And what we found is as you present, I'm trying to basically develop why a competitor will talk to you. When you're positioning this with the knowledge base you have from your future customer base, you can offer this competitor, because usually it talks about what they like or don't like about the competitive forces in the marketplace. And you can surely share any and all of that with the competitors you face. What we have found as a consulting company is once you get into a competitor positioning, and they'll talk to you if you present yourself as, I've just done 50, 75 interviews with your customer base. I have a feel for what they like or don't like about you and your competition, and I'd like to discuss it with you. What you don't do is ever pursue the profitability or the financial posture of a company that's a future competitor. You do not enter that, because they will close to the interview, thank you for your time, and indicate they've got other things to do. So you don't pose their financial posture. You want to discuss the financial posture of their competition, there's no problem. But stay away from the company that you're talking to in terms of your estimate of their financial posture. Okay? Basically, you can discuss this with competition. They end up spending more time with you than I've ever expected. When we travel, and we travel all over the country for these interviews, we often set aside X number of interviews per day, and often we don't get that done because these interviews, whether it be customer interviews or competitive interviews, go far beyond what we expect. They are gaining information from you, whether it's another customer, because you just talked to some others, you could share insight in that, or surely whether it's competition. So recognize that you do your customer interviews first, have that information base in front of you, and you're able to use it in the discussion with competition. So you'll be surprised how responsive competition is to you if you're a knowledgeable person about their business base. And that's when you approach them, when you're a knowledgeable person as well. Okay. The consumer market I alluded to earlier is very complex. It has all the, if you ever went to a consulting firm in the consumer area, they would end up having to estimate every ingredient I've discussed in a demographic and psychographic ingredient. In the business market, it's a finite market size, and it either brought to you typically by your competitive forces in the marketplace. They'll give you an estimate. And what we found, if I may, if we're not sure of it, we'll walk in and tell the competitor that, we've talked to a number of competitors, even though they may be the first one, and they've estimated the market at $1 million to $3 million a year, and 20 or 30 million a year. And I use ranges, I don't use precision. Please. We had an amusing anecdote. One young man came on board our firm who was an electrical engineer, and his first study, he estimated the market over 3 to 5 years and gave it to us in decimal points. And we were impressed by how bright he was, and really and truly how foolish he was in what he was trying to do. No one is capable of being that finite in any future forecast. So recognize you're going to be playing in the future market in this business plan, and therefore use ranges. You decide the range. It could be 1 to 3 million. It could be 5 to 7 million. It could be 10 to 20 million. It's up to you to put a range number or a set of numbers in front of your business plan. And you can work off of that. Because typically, if you have a period of numbers that you're part of your forecast, we always use the midpoint of that as the number we want to do for the forecast of the growth. But we recognize the range that may very well be there for the market forecast we're playing with. And there is nothing wrong with the range in terms of being able to operate in the future. We did that all the time for our client base. And if I may, our client base was primarily for, Fortune 500 companies. So they accept this, they live with it. That's what their business plan looks like as well. It is not finite to a number. It's typically a range of numbers on the future, because that's all we are capable of doing when we discuss the future. Okay. The question at hand is your target market. I have a question here. The question was really the pricing and income range. I'll work with pricing. You're going to have to work through with me when I get to that section about pricing. And yet you've got to forecast your own pricing. It's got to be there. And it hopefully is positioned based on your knowledge of what your competitors are doing in the marketplace from a pricing point of view. And that knowledge strictly comes from your interviews with customers. It's unusual for a competitor to talk about their pricing, but they're really aggressive about talking about other pricing of other competitors. I'm not sure you really can rely on that, because they're usually not very complimentary about the posture of a competitor, and therefore their estimate of the pricing of that competitor may be real or may not. You get a lot of it on what the customers are paying. And if you're in conversation with enough customers, you'll get a feel for the pricing range that they're facing. Okay, move on to the next segment, please. Okay, when you're in the consumer market, as I indicated earlier, there's a lot of demographic data that's required. And I portrayed it earlier in terms of the multiplicity of psychographic and data, etc. In the industrial organizations, there are typically one market set of data that you're focused on. Okay, and in the context of the work you're going to do in the market, evaluation, assessment, you could use the term research as well. It's focused initially, and I underline the word initially, on customers. And if there are potential customers out there who you have any insight from, interview them as well. Because they're evolving a product or service for the future, and knowing what that might be and what you're going to face is vital. So if there's anybody you could define as potential customers as well. And again, there are people who have approached, who basically have written about it. That it's rare anybody comes to market. Surely some do, but basically the marketplace has been identified and alerted to a new product or a new service that's coming to bear. And therefore, the customer base is able to share some of that with you. Distributors applicable to a manufactured product. They're an intermediate way to the marketplace. They're always there because rarely can you, if you're a manufacturing product, if you have the ability to do that on one-on-one. The question really is, how do you select the vendors who will supply? I believe you got to talk to your customer base on that as well. Who are the major vendors, etc. I don't think I can get involved in responding to that. Okay, then you'll see the last point on page 9 is the competition. It's the last thing you do because you approach them when you're very knowledgeable about the marketplace from all the interviews that you've done, and you have the ability to refer to those interviews as well. When you're facing an area where you have not postured it before because you didn't get any insight on it, then be creative. Set a number, set a concept aside, because what the competitor will do will correct you. They'll tell you the market's not nearly as big as your estimate, and it should be closer to, and they'll share a number with you as well. So you're not precluded from interviewing a competitive group if you don't have a market estimate yet. You'll evolve that as you talk to them. And if I may, you have no reason not to lay in front of them an estimate, whether you believe it's real or not. They'll respond to it. They'll either say you're way off, and they'll often add to that commentary by laying in a number sequence that they think is real. And that's really your approach to it. You trigger these responses by offering an observation, and you can allude to your customer interviews and say, based on those, and maybe some competitive interviews which you haven't taken yet, that you've got a feel for the market being 3 to 5 million, 5 to 10 million, growing at X% a year. So you can create a posture that'll get them to respond. I want to know if there's a printed perspective on identifying customer base again. No, you got a product to offer. You've got to be able to identify yourself who are customers who may need this product, because the assumption is, or service, if I may, that you're enhancing somebody's product or service offering by what you're offering in the marketplace yourself. And therefore, you could identify the customer base, at least some of them, and that's enhanced by talking to competition or talking to other customers who will tell you who else is in the marketplace and where else you might go. People usually are responsive as long as you're not messing with their proprietary information. And again, I allude, you don't want to get into that arena because they'll turn you off immediately. The next page, please. Okay, one ingredient in the environmental analysis is it's not yours. It's an economic forecast of the country. And the GNP, gross national product, is what you're going to see in written formats by bankers, by financial people of all shapes and sizes. They'll talk about the growth of the market. It might be the US market might grow year 1 or 2% a year, 2 or 3% a year. If it's positive, you're in a fine environment. Demographics I alluded to is in the consumer market. One of the things I'd like you to look at when you're writing your plan, and it merely impresses the reader, is look at anything you find that Congress, either the House or the Senate, may be playing with in terms of evolution of a regulation that could affect your future business. Anything you can identify in this manner, it's available, it's published. They may never have come to conclusion on what they're going to require, but it's something you can at least recognize. What it does is portray to the reader that you're on top of the things that are happening in this marketplace. And even though you don't have a final perspective, because Congress doesn't have a final perspective, you're able to identify what they're considering, and if so, what impact it might have if it evolves as they're speculating today. The technology changes are really the newer technologies that will come into your marketplace that will affect primarily a manufactured product base. They're often, they have spoken to customers to find out if they like the idea. And therefore, when you interview customers, they'll tell you, yeah, well, someone's talked to me about that, and it's this kind of product that they were talking about bringing into market. They have no hesitation in hiding it because it's not proprietary to them. It's going to be something that a third-party company is evolving, and therefore, it's something that you probably could draw out from your conversation with them. And then again, in the environmental analysis, you will always have that favorite player in the competition that you're going to interview in depth. And if there are 3 of them, if there are 5 of them, if there are 10 of them, you want to talk to all of them. And again and again and again, they'll talk to you because you've been educated by the customer base that you've already interviewed. And you will discuss that with the competition. You could exaggerate on some of the things the customers have said, and that may bring out answers that you're seeking, but you have talked to customers before you approach your competition. Next page, please. And here's our discussion of competition. This is our understanding of them, and I can't focus more of your attention on the need to gain this from the marketplace. The question was about evolving technology. And if you're in a product base, you're going to be talking about evolving technology. And if you don't know what it is, it's published, or your customer interviews are going to talk about an evolving technology, because the company posture in the evolving technology will present this to the customer base as you're doing, to talk about something new for these customers and how their technology can aid them in evolving their particular needs. And therefore, the marketplace has a sense of what these evolving technologies may be. When they're going to come to market is something else. And it's just a feel, and they shared it with them as well. Yes, the comment was made, there's always new products and new services in the market. That's absolutely true. Okay, moving beyond competition, I can't accentuate how critical they are. And again, you only get information about them when you finish your customer interview. They'll share information galore from you about people who serve them and what they like and don't like about them and why they've chosen one over the other. And you'll leave the customer interviews with a strong feel of the posture of existing competition. Next page, please. Hello. Next page, please. Thank you. This chart is one of the best charts I have for competitive features. I have postulated a set of competitive features which are qualitative in nature. I really like this chart when you're setting a product that has multiple features and the competitive features are presented in your product base. And then the U or A, B, C, D is how these competitors relate to each of the features that you're presenting. And what I've done when I've recommended this particular chart is I use a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 presentation. You look at the first ingredient of the product or service that you're looking at, and the question is should it be rated 5, which is very meaningful, or 1, which is a disaster? And every one of the competitors are going to be pursued on each of these features. So as you go through a set of products or services that exist in the marketplace, you've got a response from your product or service offering, and from, in my case, I've shown here 5 other competitors. So your chart is made of numbers. It's a set of 5s, 4s, 3s, 2s, 1, and it portrayed whose product feature is viewed by the marketplace as having the best offering, most meaningful offering. And therefore, whether it's got a 5, a 4, or a 1, you'll know how the marketplace rates it. So you got a chart that is filled with numbers, and it's relating to an individual set of features of products or services. And that's available when you talk through to the marketplace. And if you start with X number of competitive features, the marketplace will add to it if necessary, but they'll give you the evaluation. So it's your product or service offering versus the A, B, C, D, E companies they're offering as well. And that's a quantitative offering in terms of the measure of your success versus theirs. Next page, please. We talked about pricing earlier, and obviously that's pretty critical. The basic pricing that's often used is the one that starts with the cost, direct and indirect cost, and adds a profit margin. My favorite play with the profit margin are my friends at Costco. They publish, they don't hide it. They have 14% margin on their product and service offering. And 14 is not a very significant number. So how does Costco succeed? Because they charge a fee to be part of the Costco scenario. Therefore, Costco makes it big on their fee. Costco does not make it big on their 14% margin. So there will be a margin that you'll evolve, hopefully with more significance than 14%. And that's what you're going to add to your direct and indirect cost base of your product or service. Customer-driven pricing, that's if your interviews with customers come out with an input to you that says, I've paid, $6 to $7 per unit for this particular product in the past. And they may share it with you in terms of context of your question. I often find that they may not be honest about it because often they don't want to admit to the fact they've been overpaying. And if you ever feel that the market is really playing out at a lower number that they're paying today, it's something you probably don't want to share with them. But if you do, you got to be very cautious about it because it's embarrassing an interviewee, and that's not one way to gain information. So recognize they may or may not be honest about what they're paying. Okay, so we then have the competitor-based pricing. Well, they're not going to be honest about their pricing. What they like to talk about is their competition's ingredients, whether it be market share or whether it be pricing. And that's what you could use. Because if you talk to that dozen or more competitors, you're going to get a handful of numbers, and they'll probably coalesce around their one set of numbers based on the number of competitors you've actually talked to. So you'll get a feel from your competitive base, and they'll share it with you because they're talking about their competition. They're not talking about themselves. Okay? And that'll aid you in gaining a sense as to where your cost positioning, your price positioning should be. Next page, please. Okay, if you're in a manufacturing posture and it's a manufacturing product, normally you require a distribution channel or more to get your product to market, and you've got multiple margins within that play that you've got to be conscious of because that's how your product's going to be priced. You are pricing X to layer number one, the distributor, and they in turn are changing that pricing and increasing it because they want a margin as well. Price sensitivity, it'll either go up or down based on what's happening and changes in your marketplace. And you may be capable of raising prices or more likely reducing prices based on changes in your marketplace. The ideal scenario is the razor blade sell. If you're able to have a product that is sold because you sold a product base And from that, they got ingredients of that product base that's required often. And in that case, it's a repetitive to sell for you, and that's an ideal scenario. Having only where you're selling one to the marketplace with no likelihood of the razor blade and razor scenario, that's not a problem. It's what most products face, and that's really where you're likely to be with both your product and service. So it is what it is. A discount structure, you're probably going to have one. Again, a question about nicknames. That'll evolve and you're not going to direct it. The marketplace will evolve. No, the question is, if the product were made in the US, will they pay a higher price? My expectation is, because I had so many international plays in the format of my firm, the answer is no. I really believe the customer will pay what's the best pricing for them. And if the product or service serves their need, and whether it's a domestic pricing or international coming from out of the country, I don't think it matters. As long as the quality base remains at a level that's acceptable to them. So I think pricing can change based on quality, but it's not one because it comes internationally or domestically. Next page, please. We've talked about how you market your product or service, and therefore the question is, how do you promote it? We're assuming, or I'm assuming in this context, basically it is because you're in typically a startup or a relatively small business, advertising is normally not within your financial capability. Couponing could be, you use it. It reminds me of the miles associated with our friends at the airlines, and it's often something you may look to do. But couponing is typically a consumer product base. You must have a website. And there are entities. In fact, when I was teaching at IIT, an associate of mine taught website creation. So gaining website from multiple sources is accessible. And if you work with somebody like SCORE, the mentor who you'd work with will be able to aid you in evolving your website as well. Okay. In selling a product, you've got you've got public relations and networking. Let me talk through that. The advantage of that tool is it's yours. You're doing it. You have the ability to speak at association meetings. You have the ability to write articles. You have the ability to submit articles online or to hard publications, and they're welcoming your subject. And you don't write about your product or service offering. You write about the concepts associated with it in the industry that you're going to be serving and why this will evolve as an opportunity in the industry. So you can create a marketing tool that establishes you personally as an expert. And when you're an expert, it's amazing what you can do in terms of intriguing people to be part of your customer base. Again, whether it's a product or a service. The email or direct campaign, it's usable, but I've never found that it's a meaningful play. And the frequent buyer programs, again, are paralleled by the airlines and others who have points or equivalent. You can play with that if you'd like to over time. I'd wait till you establish your business, and then you want to make that an ingredient of it. Surely that's up to you. Okay. The question was, how do you get the marketing tools to help you? From my point of view, you work with an organization like SCORE and their mentors who will aid you in finding these sources, or they will aid you in creating it on your own. But it's accessible to you, no doubt about it, and will aid you personally in making it happen because you're bright and capable of evolving on your own. Yes, the insert score, correct. Okay, next page, please. Forecasting sales and penetration of the marketplace. That's critical to your future. We've termed it your pro forma financial statement. Therefore, it evolves from your sales forecasting in the future. If I may, doing it on your own is pretty tough play. Looking at competition and getting a sense as to how they've succeeded in penetrating and the kind of forecast that they're facing in terms of the growth of their business. And that comes from other competitors, it comes from customers. We rarely have a size of competition unless it's publicly owned, but they have a feel for the growth of that particular company. And the other competitors can give you sizing. They'll give you estimates of the size of their competition. Again, if you don't know the number going in, because as you finish customers, your customer interviews, you may not know it. Don't hesitate creating a number range, even though it's far-fetched. Create it. Offer that, say, your basic interviews with other competitors, and this is your first competitor interview, has produced a size of the market of 3 to 5 million a year. And it may be way off, but that competitor may react to it and normally does. And if that one competitor doesn't, others will. And you're going to be talking to a series of competitors. So when you're all done, they're going to correct you and bring you into play on a number that is more reasonable from their point of view as to the size of the marketplace that they're serving and the market segment that you're going to be serving when you bring your product to market or your service to market. Okay, we're looking at monthly estimates. Ideally, the private equity people like a monthly estimate. I think it's pushing too hard for you. That an annual estimate is doable, and then you go to a 3 to 5 year base. Okay, next page, please. I'm talking about the three charts that I alluded to earlier, the aggressive, modest, and slow. You want to present all three based on your interviews with the marketplace, whether it be the customer base or more likely the customer base. And you've got a forecast over 3 to 5 years. And it's the best you can do with the knowledge base that you have at that point in time. Okay. If you play that out and show it to your competition, they will react to it. Again, they'll tell you either they think you're out of left field and you're nowhere near what it could be or is, or they'll tell you you're probably reasonable about it. And they'll make suggestions if necessary to tell you where it is in aggressive, whether it's modest or slow. You will position what you think is real based on what the market has said about your product or service. If they're sold on you, they'll probably be closer to modest and maybe even into aggressive. And if they're not sold on your product or service, they'll be more likely into slow. Ideally, they may reach to modest growth. Okay, based on your forecast, the detailed assumptions, you're going to state those. When you talk about the growth of your business and where you're going with it, you've got to establish the premises you use to talk about why it's going to grow at X% a year. And often it comes from your customer interviews, who are your buyers of your product or service. They'll give you a feel for how rapidly it might grow. If not, it'll surely come from your competitive interviews. Will tell you they could possibly grow at that level, or the market is growing at this level, and you've got to decide whether you can exceed that growth or you're merely going to be part of the same growth posture that's in place now. Page number 17, please. This is a page merely talking about the needs you have to start. How much money you're going to need and where it's going to come from. It's either your personal funding, your family's funding, or from, it talks about new or current business. I'm not convinced a lot of the growth is going to be supported by your existing business unless you're able to posture it well and get a growth curve of meaning. It's really an investor coming in a third party, whether it be a bank, who is going to require lots of collateral, or it's going to be a private equity company who's going to become a partner of yours in the business space. Next page, please. I'd like to move beyond that because it's really focused on existing business. And if there are dollars we can get from existing business, our primary expectation is our audience today is primarily startup based. Okay, and this is whether or not there are things you can do in your existing business to gain additional cash. And that's to be read by those looking at it. Next page, please. We're at the pro forma base now. Remember our curves, aggressive, honest, and slow. And in our charts, we're going to have the three. You're going to select something between modest and slow or modest and aggressive. And the curve you ultimately agree upon for your growth is going to be somewhere in that thing. It could be right on aggressive, modest, or slow. It could be somewhere in between, but it's in that range. And if you're not quite ready to estimate aggressive, but maybe your product is or service has that capacity, then you're going to have the third curve that has aggressive in there, even though you're not quite there yet in terms of expecting your business to come in that play. And then we're really saying you're going to select the scenario you believe will evolve for your product. And if I may add the word why to it, it has to know why you got it. The question is, how do I get the pro forma statement? You evolve them. That pro forma is built initially around revenue. And below that, in revenue, you face all the costs, whether they be direct, like salary, or compensation for employees, or whether they be overhead. That's where you get your estimate of the future. So you create it based on your knowledge base of what it costs to operate a business. Next page, please. A crucial observation, if I may. I found people who write a business plan who contend that they will be paid from the profitability of their business. And if I may, that's the last thing in the world I would do if I were to invest in you. I expect your compensation, probably as CEO, president of the company, to be included in the initial profit and loss pro forma that you're going to create. I can't take a chance on you not being there in the future. If God forbid something happened to you and I have to replace you, I'm not going to be able to replace you if you don't have a compensation built into your pro forma. Yeah, I would probably eliminate all profitability in our business if I was one of those who has compensation coming out of profitability. So don't do that, please. Your compensation is front end, it's built into the P&L statement that you're going to create. And recognize the level of it will come from anything you can sense is true in your industry. And you can talk to people when you're doing these interviews. Your customer base doesn't offer anything there, but your competitive base may, and may give you some feel for that. Or in written format, there are people who have written about compensation levels and profitability levels in businesses. And you got to find one that relates to your industry segment because it's different by segment, surely. And you'll want to know that. But basically, the key thing on this page, number 21, is that you must be compensated initially. You don't wait for that because you can't function, and I can't afford to have you in that posture because your risk is too great if something were to happen to you. Okay, next page, please. I alluded to risks earlier. Every business has risks. And you're going to have to look and assume they're there, and you want to define them. And normally, in most instances, when I see risks defined, they associate with a business that doesn't have the adequate funding yet. And there are certain risks it has because it's not there. So these are mitigated once you succeed in getting finances. But if I may, when someone who is an investor potential reads your plan, I promise you, when they focus their reading, they're going to look at your downside. They're going to believe in your upside because you say you can grow at that manner. They may challenge that a bit, but basically that's not their focus. Their focus on things you didn't include in your cost scenarios, things that are risks that you haven't recognized. So therefore, the more you can recognize risks that you're going to face, and then most critically, how you're going to mitigate these risks is enhancing your business plan significantly. Because what you're recognizing for the reader is that you're real, that everybody has risks. You know you're going to have it in your business. Here are some that I fear, and here's how I'm going to mitigate them as well. And that's embodied in the content of your business plan. Next page, please. Next page, please. Thank you. When we're starting to create the plan, we often spend too much time writing it. And I'll talk about that in the next section. But basically, the action plan is getting it done now. The musts that have to be done, you often write the plan and may even on occasion have a third party aid you with subsections because you don't have time or you don't have knowledge in writing it. As you work with a mentor, my experience with the mentors at SCORE at least, they're not going to write the section for you, but they're surely going to aid you in writing it. And you will be the source, but they're going to be the critique of it to make sure it's optimized in terms of your needs. Okay, we're talking about a calendar, and that is to see how you're progressing, because you want to check your progress based on your forecast of getting things done, and therefore revenue levels you want to reach over time. Page 22, please. 24, I'm sorry. And then the punchline, write the plan. Often people spend too much time prepping the plan writing before they actually write it. And therefore, I ask, do everything I'd like to suggest to prep for the plan, and then please write it. And then one ingredient of writing a plan, and it's a crucial one, again, from my point of view, is you don't count pages on draft 1 or 2. You write the plan in a manner that you tell the world everything you know about that business that you're about to enter or which you hope to expand within. So it doesn't matter how many pages you face. Just write it and your mentor will aid you with it. And then once you've written it, whatever the number of pages may be, you have the ability to have your mentor and have third parties who you trust and respect read the plan you've written and aid you in reducing the number of pages. Because typically, when you write from the heart, you basically have overwritten. And there are redundant pages, et cetera, et cetera. But third parties can read your plan and aid you in cutting down. Having spent a career reading my associates' writing of their business plan for their clients, the most difficult thing in the world is to create pages that they haven't written. The easiest thing for me would be to reduce pages that they have written. So I ask you again, don't write in a manner where you count the pages as you're writing. Write everything you think you want to offer to the marketplace. Don't hesitate in including it. And someone who you work with, whether it be your mentor or a third party who you trust, will read through it and aid you in bringing it down to a more workable number if you've overwritten. But don't cut it down yourself. Just write from a knowledge base that you have, that the marketplace has told you about, where you hope to go with it, the kind of growth you believe you can attain, and why you can do it. Just write that, and it'll be effective end product. Then you reduce it if necessary, and it'll be done through whatever third-party assistance you're going to get. So bringing it down a number of pages is doable. Adding pages from a third party to your document is borders on the impossibility because it rarely is very effective addition. Next page, please. The reality of these pages to follow, there are a couple, three of them, is we all make mistakes. We're not above and beyond that, no matter how well prepared we are. So I thought it appropriate to focus on some mistakes I've seen, and you've got to mitigate those mistakes, obviously, in formulating your plan. The one that I've seen most often, and the one I'm most concerned about, is you're not focused, which really means you got an idea that your business future is made up of multiple product or service offerings. It may be true, but the business plan I want you to write now is about one service or product. Or if there's more than one, it's maybe two or three because it's a team of something that require each other to support it. But it's not a broad base of products or services. And someone approached me with that once, and I said they may be bright, but they're not bright enough to write multiple business plans simultaneously. The one that I should have put in bold and I didn't is the one that consists of my life, and what I recommend here is evaluating, assessing your potential market. Don't rely on your friends and relatives' input about why you've got a winner on your market offering, your service offering. Please let the marketplace tell you what they think of it, and therefore make those interviews. And if you're able to do it, do these interviews personally, which implies, since you're not going to be able to fund traveling around the country, most likely, do it by people in the Chicago area personally. It's a major market on almost anything you might sell, and therefore it's worth pursuing. The answer of whether a service and product going together and being part of the same plan, the answer is most normally yes. And he is suggesting the HVAC business. My guess is it's a business, it's HVAC, and I had clients in that area, and therefore product and service go together as an integral part of it. So yes, they should be in the same business plan. Okay, understanding the nature and technological threats, as if you have a product. And my suggestion is, if it's a product you know is going to be attacked technologically, either by the competitors you're about to face that are in big, or if there's a new technology or evolving technology going to be there, you want that identified and characterized in your business plan. Not understanding your customer needs. That's sort of the basis of a business plan. You're writing because you're going to evolve a business, but it's going to have one where you're serving your customers' needs. If you're not serving your customer needs, you don't have a business. So recognize, understanding those needs and determining whether your product or service really adds to those needs and enhances those needs that your customer has right now. Not fully understanding the depth or breadth of your competition. I've alluded to a number of times earlier that that's crucial. They're going to be there. They're not going to welcome you to the marketplace. They're going to do everything they know how to mitigate your entry into the marketplace. So please be prepared for that. Again, we handle that initially by assuming we were competitors. What will we do to mitigate your entry into the marketplace? If I created a product base to compete with you. Therefore, you've got to find out where their product or service offering is today and what the marketplace thinks of it and how your product enhances it, how your service enhances it, or if it doesn't enhance it, you're more likely not going to make penetration into the marketplace. And then fully understanding your competition, I've alluded to often here, And then understanding your operating costs and estimating your revenue. We've been through that because that's going to come from your competition primarily. They're the only ones got a feel for the size of the market, their share of the market, and therefore where you think you're going to fit within that spectrum of competition. Next page, please. Okay, question is, don't go into the business because you're a believer in your practice service. Make sure you've done the preliminary work that I've alluded to in this business plan before you spend your time and dollars to gain entry. And trying to enter without a business plan is a critical mistake. Whether you're seeking funding or whether you're not, it doesn't matter. You need a business plan. Existing businesses need a business plan to enhance what they're doing. Every meaningful business that I've encountered has a business plan and writes one every 6 months, rewrites it every year, but they rewrite it because things change. They change in some way, their market changes in some way. So a new and realistic business plan has to be put in position. And then if you're tough enough not to listen to anybody's recommendations to you, and an entrepreneur who believes in himself and his product and service offering may not, it's a major mistake. You're vulnerable as can be to tomorrow's in this marketplace because you haven't asked the marketplace to guide you, and it will. And then, of course, you're going to be facing all kinds of legal intricacies, and you've got to be prepared to handle that and fund it because the lawyers are going to have to be involved in a new business play as well. Next page, please. I'm going to ask if there are any more questions at this point in time, because we pretty well are at the end of my offering today. I'd be pleased to respond to you if you've saved any questions for now. Karen asked if I would respond to her specific question. Karen, I really believe you want to play that out with a mentor. I don't have the capacity to respond to multiple specific questions about someone's business. So I really believe you should do so through an organization like SCORE. They'll be happy to respond to it. I'm not sure I understand Karen's comment to everybody about marketing, so we'll let it go. Any other thoughts or questions at this point in time? If not, I'd like to thank you for your time and your interest. And I wish you well with your future new product or service offering for the marketplace. It's a challenge, but you can make it work, but prepare yourself for it by talking to your market first. Good luck.
Thank you, Aaron, for today's presentation. I hope all of our attendees got the information that they were looking for today. If you are a part of the BACP Entrepreneur Certificate Program, you can get credit for joining this webinar by sending an email to bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. Again, that email address is bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. To learn more about our upcoming webinars, please visit chicago.gov/business education. On March 11th, we will be hosting our first in-person small business expo at King King College. To learn more information about that, please visit chicago.gov/biz expo. That's BIZ expo. Toya, do you have anything to say before we close out?
The question at hand, there was one question asked a number of times today, and it just was asked again, is how do they get a copy of the presentation?
This presentation will be available on our YouTube page. You will go to youtube.com/Chicago BACP. Again, that's youtube.com/Chicago BACP.
And it's a no charge, as everything coming from SCORE is, so take advantage of that if it'll be helpful to you.
Thanks, everyone, and have a great weekend.
Good luck. Thank you. Okay, babe.